Recently, while exploring Morrowind, one thought suddenly hit me. What do people in Morrowind actually eat? When you play the game, it's surprisingly hard to notice any food. It's not just sitting around on tables or shelves in every house or shop the way it's in Skyrim. Most of the time, you only find ingredients hidden inside barrels and boxes. But is that really what people eat? How can we be sure those are actual food ingredients and not things used only for potions or maybe for something else like tea? We also don't have markets with stalls like in Skyrim, and there are no dedicated food shops either. But we do have taverns. And in real life, places like that sell things you can eat or drink, right? They don't normally sell random, non-edible items. So my first step in this little investigation was to check all the inns in Morrowind just to see what we can actually buy from the owners. I made a list of every item I could find except for drinks. Of course, merchant inventories change a bit, so what they sell is not always exactly the same. But by checking all the inns, I hoped I could cover most of the things people actually eat in Morrowind, or at least something close to that. Still, that approach feels a bit incomplete, right? So we are going to check this in a few other ways as well. We'll visit plantations, farms and houses and even talk to some NPCs. We'll also look at ingredient effects and check the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages to see how they're used in Dunmer cuisine. I must say, some of these dishes are very interesting. Based on all the information, we'll figure out what exactly Dunmer eat and what their main sources of carbs, proteins and fats are. Let's first take a look at the full list of items I created based on what I found in inns and discuss it. As you can see, there are definitely some things here that are clearly not edible. For example, lockpicks and probes. Unless someone in Morrowind has a very unusual diet, I think we can safely cross those out. The same goes for pearls and rubies I found in Gateway Inn. I mean, maybe some Telvanni wizard enjoys chewing gemstones, but I doubt that is common. I think we can also remove hides, leather and skin, since those are most likely used for crafting armor, clothing or maybe potions. Now, let's see if we can narrow the list down even more. Some ingredients only appeared in 1, 2 or maybe 3 inns. That probably means there's a good chance they are not really meant to be eaten either, so let's quickly talk about them. First, we have comberry. Just from the name alone, it already sounds like a fruit, and when you look at the plant it grows on, it definitely resembles something like blueberries or raspberries. Comberry is actually used to produce shane in Morrowind. And interestingly, comberry only has one negative effect in the game, which is draining fatigue. That actually lines up pretty well with alcohol, since drinking it can leave you feeling a bit tired or sluggish. The important thing is that it doesn't damage your health or poison you, so I would definitely not count it as dangerous. Because of that, comberry definitely stays on our list. Now, let's talk about corkbulb root. It actually resembles parsley root, so at first glance it looks like something that could easily end up in a soup or stew. And when we check its alchemy effects, it gets even more convincing because it doesn't seem to have a single negative effect, which is super rare. Instead, it cures paralysis and restores health, which honestly sounds like a pretty amazing vegetable. So at this point, it looks like corkbulb root is edible. Next, we have gold cannet. It's a beautiful yellow flower, and even though there are plenty of edible flowers in the real world, I think we have to cross this one out. The reason is simple. Its alchemy effect drains health. And I don't know about you, but with an effect like that, I would definitely not put it into my salad. I think we can also cross out red lichen. It's a fairly rare ingredient that grows on rocks, and it can cure common diseases. That sounds much more like a medicinal herb than something people casually throw into dinner. So I'd say this one is most likely used for potions rather than food. Scarecrow is a bit tricky though. When you look at its effects, it drains strength and health, which already sounds like a terrible snack. But it's actually used in a few dishes that are listed on the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. So now I'm a little confused. Maybe Dunmer cuisine is just intense and you have to have strong guts. Or maybe they simply enjoy having some stomach issues. Either way, it looks like we should leave it on the list for now. Next, we have trema root. This one doesn't have drain health effect, which is already a good sign if we are trying to figure out whether something is edible. On top of that, it actually appears in a few recipes. So based on that, I think it's safe to leave it on the list. And how about black anther? It's basically just another flower, and from everything I could find, it's not used in Dunmer cuisine at all. So I feel pretty comfortable crossing that one one out. Oh, and from what I checked, crushed fiber and resin are also not used in any recipes, which probably means they are meant for crafting or alchemy rather than cooking. So we can cross those out as well. So those two are the last to remove for now, since the rest of the ingredients I found in at most 3 inns also appear in at least one Dunmer dish. I also checked the alchemy effects for all of them, and surprisingly only one of them has a drain health effect. That one is rubrush. But from what I've seen, rubrush is usually used more like a seasoning. So maybe in small amounts it's perfectly fine to eat. Kind of like salt in real life. If you use a little, it makes the food taste a lot better. If you eat way too much, well, that might not end well. What really surprised me though is that the Dunmer apparently use grave dust in their dishes. Yes, actual grave dust. You can find it in a meal called Ancestor's Rest. That definitely can boost your appetite, right? And one more thing. I didn't find moon sugar in any recipes during this search, but we all know it's edible. Maybe not exactly healthy, but definitely edible. At this point, we have a solid list of things that are probably edible and used by the Dunmer for cooking. Now, let's take a closer look at the ingredients that appeared the most often, because those are probably the most important parts of their everyday diet. Okay, so based on what we can find in inns, the clear winner is saltrice. I found it in 12 out of 18 inns, which makes it the most common food item by quite a margin. In second place, we have Hakolo leaf with 10 appearances. And in third place, we actually have a tie between a large kwama eggs, small kwama eggs, and scuttle, all showing up 9 times. After that, the list continues with bread, rat meat, hound meat, marshmallow, ashiem, and crab meat. So these seem to be some of the most common foods available in taverns across Morrowind. But before talking about each of these ingredients, let's make sure these are actually things people in Morrowind eat in their everyday lives. We already know that in Morrowind, just because something shows up in an inn, it doesn't automatically mean it's a major part of the Dunmer diet. So let's check something else. We have farmhouses and plantations in Morrowind, right? So looking into what the Dunmer actually grow on Vvardenfell might be really helpful. The idea is simple. If something appears both in inns and on farms, there is a pretty good chance it's a real staple food. We can find 4 plantations and 9 farmhouses in Morrowind. However, 2 of those plantations don't seem to grow any crops at all. One of them actually keeps netches. You can see them floating above an open field, which looks like an area prepared just for them. That's a pretty interesting sight. Why keep cows and goats when you can have flying jellyfish? The other plantation also has netches around, but it's a bit less clear whether they are actually part of the plantation or if they just happen to float there. Unlike the first place, there is no big field where they clearly belong. I also haven't found any fields with plants, though I did find some flowers growing in pots in front of the house there, but those look more like decoration than anything related to farming. So if we remove those 2 plantations, we are left with 11 places that actually grow plants. Now let's go back to our list of ingredients from the previous discussion. Let me add all farm locations next to the appropriate plants I found in those places. So as you can see, the Dunmer are growing comberry, corkbulb root, marshmallow, saltrice, ashiem, and willow anther. Oh, and let's add gold cannet and stoneflower petals to the list, because I also found them growing in 2 places. Yes, I know. Earlier I removed gold cannet from the list, but since it actually grows on plantations, it makes sense to add it back, at least for now. The rest of the items are not growing on farms, which honestly is not a huge surprise because many of them are not plants in the first place. But something else is actually quite surprising. The 2 plants that appear the most often on farms are comberry and corkbulb root. Both of them show up on 10 out of the 11 farms. And when I was checking ins earlier, I only found them in one place, the Balmora Council Club. That feels a little weird, right? With comberry, it actually starts to make sense when you think about it. Even if we don't see the fruit itself very often in inns, we constantly see Shane, which is made from comberries. And let's be honest, every inn in Morrowind seems to have plenty of alcohol. Sometimes they have more drinks than actual food. So yeah, you might not find a proper meal, but you will always find the classics like brandy, flint, grief, master, Shane, and sujama. Looks like alcohol is clearly a big deal in Morrowind, which explains why comberries are grown on so many farms. But corkbulb root? What's going on with that one? Technically, I found it in one dish, so it should be edible. But after digging a bit deeper, I found out that corkbulb root is often used as substitute for wood. Trees struggle to grow in the harsh environment of Vvardenfell, so corkbulb root becomes a useful alternative material. It's commonly used to make arrows and bolts, so seeing a lot of it growing on farms actually makes sense, but I don't think that people actually eat it. Because of that, I think we can safely cross it off our food list. Next, we have saltrice and marshmallow, both appearing on 8 farms. farms. I was actually expecting saltrice to be the most common crop on farms, but after diving deeper into corkbulb and comberry, their high numbers also make sense. Still, if we counted every individual plant on each farm, there's a good chance saltrice would still come out on top because some of the fields are clearly dedicated to growing only it. And when we combine the numbers from farms and inns, saltrice is obviously the ingredient that appears the most often overall. So it's definitely something the Dunmer eat a lot of. The way it grows even resembles rice in the real world, and the name pretty much gives it away. Looks like someone was inspired by Asian kitchens, where rice is a strong base for many dishes. Oh, and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages also backs this up, saying that saltrice is considered a staple of Dunmer cuisine. It can be eaten in many ways, for example as porridge with scuttle, and it appears in a lot of different dishes. Now, let's talk about marshmallow. Besides farms, you can often find it growing near water sources. According to generic dialogue in the game, the sweet pulp of marshmallow reeds is considered a delectable foodstuff. That sounds very similar to sugarcane, and it even looks like it. It's being used in baked goods and dessert recipes, so this one definitely stays on our list. Another plant I found on farms and also in a few inns is ashium. Ashium is described as a tough tuberous root vegetable. It's commonly baked or prepared in a slow cooker, and apparently it can even be ground to make falafel. I also found it in several recipes, so this is clearly another important part of the Dunmer diet. The next plant I stumbled across on farms was willow flowers, which give us an ingredient called willow anther. It's basically the pollen of a flower. From what I could find, its leaves can be added to salads, while the anther is only used in medicinal tea, so it does seem edible, but probably used in very small amounts. Because of that, I think it makes more sense to move it to a different list where we'll keep ingredients that act more like spices or small additions rather than main food items. The last plants we can find are stoneflowers and gold kennet, both appearing on 2 farms, but I couldn't find them used in any recipes, and none of the generic dialogues mention them as cooking ingredients, so I think it's safe to cross those out. Now, when we look at our table again, there are still many ingredients that are found in just 1, 2, or at most 3 inns. All of them besides moon sugar do show up in recipes, but mostly as very small additions to dishes. Because of that, I'm going to move most of those ingredients to the second list, the one for edible things that work more like spices or minor ingredients. Yes, let's move moon sugar too. Okay, so I decided to keep wickweed on the list, even though it doesn't appear very often in inns and I didn't find it growing on farms. The reason is pretty simple. Wickweed is a wild grain that actually looks very similar to our real-world wheat. That makes it pretty obvious what it's used for: bread. And bread is something we can find quite often in inns across Morrowind. When I looked into it further, I also found quite a few recipes that use wickweed, which makes it pretty clear that it's an important ingredient. I also kept scrib jerky and scrib jelly. Just from the names alone, you can already guess these are things people eat. According to generic dialogue in the game, crushed scribs provide a nutritious but sour-tasting gelatin, so I think scrib jelly can actually work as a dessert on its own. There's even a recipe for scrib jelly pie where it's used as the filling, and it also appears in a few other dishes. And how about scrib jerky? It's exactly what it sounds like. Scribs are cut into strips and dried in the sun. You can't just loot them off the scribs themselves. You mostly find them with vendors or in people's houses. That shows scribs have to be processed before they become food. So what else do the Dunmer eat? Well, there are a few types of meat that show up in inns, such as hound meat, rat meat, and crab meat. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. People eating meat is not exactly a shocking discovery, but there are actually some ingredients that appear even more often than those. Things like bread, kwama eggs, hakolo leaf, and scuttle. Seeing bread and eggs in inns is not surprising at all, right? There are so many kwama egg mines in Morrowind that it would actually be strange if eggs were not a big part of the Dunmer diet. But that brings us to a more interesting question. What exactly are hakolo leaf and scuttle? Both of them appear even more often than bread and eggs. Hakolo leaf is described as a hardy, succulent, edible leafy green. It's a reliable, year-round vegetable that can be eaten either raw or cooked. It shows up in things like salads and ashium chips. There aren't a huge number of dishes that use it, but the fact that it appears so often in inns suggests that the Dunmer probably eat it quite regularly. While some other leafy plants seem to work more like spices or small additions, this one feels more like a proper vegetable that people eat alongside their carbs and eggs. It feels a bit like aloe vera, which is edible succulent and even looks pretty similar. And finally, we have scuttle, which also appears very often in inns. I've actually wondered about this ingredient many times while playing Morrowind. It's not something that clearly comes from a plant or an animal you can hunt. You just find it in various places or buy it from vendors. It kind of looks like a steak to me, but the name doesn't really tell you what it actually is. Fortunately, the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages comes with an answer. Scuttle is described as a cheesy-like greasy substance made from the flesh of local beetles that is apparently remarkably tasty. To be honest, that description doesn't sound very appetizing. I still wasn't sure if we should treat it as cheese or very fatty bug meat, but I found the crab meat and scuttle recipe in the Redoran Cooking Secrets book, which resolved my doubts. It says beat eggs, wheat and scuttle in a large bowl, so it definitely has to be cheese with a very creamy, buttery consistency if we can beat it. Okay, so here we have two lists of items that people in Morrowind seem to eat. The list on the left shows the foods that appear the most often and seem to be the real foundation of their diet. Now, scrib jelly and scrib jerky might not feel like the most common ingredients, but they are not just tiny additions or spices either, so they still deserve a place here. Looking at everything together, it seems like the Dunmer base their diet mainly on saltrice as their main source of carbs, kwama eggs as an important source of protein, scuttle as a source of fats, and hako low leaf as their main vegetable. On top of that, they also eat a decent amount of bread and a few kinds of meat. For dessert, it looks like sweet marshmallow might be the most likely option. And when it comes to drinks, they probably enjoy quite a lot of Shane, especially if we consider how much cranberry is grown on farms. That's a pretty strong hint that this drink is very popular. And of course, we cannot forget about ashiam. There is a recipe for ashiam chips, so I like to imagine people snacking on those while relaxing after a long day. One thing I really like about this whole little investigation is how well the pieces fit together. The foods that appear most often in inns actually match pretty nicely with things we eat in real life like bread, meat and eggs, and what the Dunmer grow on farms. Of course, there are some items you can find in inns that are not edible, but it's still impressive how much we can figure out just by exploring these places in Morrowind. Information about Dunmer cuisine from the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages also helped a lot since it confirmed which ingredients are actually used in real dishes. Another really cool detail is that if you start checking containers inside people's houses, the foods you see the most are the ones that actually appear on our list of main ingredients people eat in Morrowind. For example, here you can see hako low leaves, scuttle, saltrice and eggs all stored right next to each other. And all of them are the ones we just discussed as the main sources of carbs, protein, fats and veggies. How cool is that? You can also sometimes spot these foods sitting on shelves or tables, but you really have to pay attention because they are easy to miss. They don't have vibrant colors and they are not placed in a way that immediately catches your eye. When it comes to the other list with spices and edible ingredients that serve as small cooking additions, there are actually quite a few more that I haven't found for sale in inns. Things like bittergreen, ash salts or hyphafacia. Bittergreen is nourishing and safe to eat when boiled, but it's highly toxic if eaten raw. Hyphafacia is a mushroom that Ajira described in her report as good for eating, but it makes you clumsy. Apparently, it also makes Nixhound meat more edible. Ash salts show up in some recipes, and I even found it sitting on a table near other food in the game, so it definitely belongs on the list. There are probably a few more ingredients that the Dunmer also use, so if you know of any I missed here, let me know in the comments. So what do you think about the food in Morrowind? Did you already know what the Dunmer actually eat? Did anything surprise you? Oh, and do you like talking about theories like that? If so, feel free to join my Discord server. It's dedicated to chats about Morrowind, other classic games and casual stuff. You can find the link in the channel and video descriptions. Hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, thanks for watching.